Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the only unapologetically progressive Sunday morning news and talk show for the Hoosier State. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington. We've got a packed show this morning. Lots going on this week. End of the government shutdown. A whole mess of Epstein files coming out, and Indiana Republicans do not have the votes for redistricting. We will talk about all of that. But first, you know the routine. Do please like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the bell icon. I conveniently have all my social media handles right there on the screen for you, so you can follow me at Who's Left on any of the social media sites on Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram. It matches the web domain at whosleft.us. Follow me there. All right, I'm bad at the self-promotion. I get it. Paid subscription at whosleft.us really helps. Let me get that one out of the way before I welcome in my fabulous guests this week. Let's welcome back to the show my politics mom, as I like to call her, my good friend, Dee Owens. Dee, welcome.
Thank you there. I note I'm an old lady with a lot of opinions, so I hope that helps.
Hey, listen, it says it right there on the screen. It's official.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back. Another returning guest, one of our regulars here on the show, another good friend. There is Jennifer David. Jennifer, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Always love having you here. Appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you introducing me to our next guest, a newcomer. There is Tabitha Ziegler. Tabitha, welcome. Hey.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Why don't you introduce yourselves to folks who haven't met you here before?
Okay, so I'm Tabitha Ziegler. I run a podcast called Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. And I'm an advocate and activist for all things autism and disability.
Very good. Looking forward to talking to you more as we, go into the future here. And first, we are going to, let me say, we're going to talk about some autism-related things, some neurodiversity community-related stuff toward the end of the show. We've only got D till about noon today, so we're gonna hang out and talk all things autism in the news this week with Jennifer and Tabitha, who both work in those spaces. So I'm looking forward to that. But first, let's turn to this week's U.S. and international headlines in a segment I like to call Who Cares? Because these things are happening over there, but why do they matter to everyday Hoosiers? So let us begin. So if you recall, late last Sunday night, President Trump issued pardons to 77 people accused of helping him try to steal the 2020 election, including New York sewer rat Rudy Giuliani, former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and wackadoodle attorney Sidney Powell. This was announced by DOJ pardon czar Ed Martin, himself a January 6th planner. And speaking of pardons for J6ers, one of the 1,500 plus insurrectionists Trump pardoned on day one in January now faces charges of sexual assault and kidnapping in Utah. Only the best people, right? Also this week, on Monday, some good news for a change. The Supreme Court denied an attempt to overturn the landmark 2015 Obergefell versus Hodges case that legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. The judges rejected the latest appeal by Kim Davis, a former county clerk in Kentucky. Remember her? She just won't go away. She refused to issue marriage licenses based on her religious beliefs. Many were worried, given this court's recent predilection to overturn precedent and the right's extreme Christian nationalist turn, that Obergefell was in danger, but it appears safe for now. So good news there. Also Monday, the Trump administration claimed in a court filing that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will run out of money by early 2026, and the mechanism to continue funding the organization is itself unlawful. This is the most direct attempt yet to shut down the consumer watchdog, which at this point has recovered over $21 billion for consumers who have been ripped off by lenders, but has drawn the ire of conservatives since its inception. In another court filing this week, the administration is taking aim at the hearing-impaired community, of all people, appealing a federal judge's order requiring the White House to provide sign language interpreters at press briefings. Also this week, we learned that ethics watchdogs at Fannie Mae, the government-backed mortgage financing provider, were removed from their jobs as they investigated whether administration officials had improperly accessed mortgage information of political opponents. This, according to the Wall Street Journal. And I'm just going to pause there after those U.S. headlines and ask Dee if any one of those stands out to you.
Well, sure. The CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they have never liked it because it's what Elizabeth Warren wanted, to protect consumers. So them not liking it is not a new thing at all, but it's an ongoing thing. And they failed to mention that maybe the reason that it's going to run out of money is because they've crippled the mechanism to bring in the money. And that could be a problem, you think?
Right.
So, as usual, it's obfuscation and big B, big S.
Yep, as is typical from this administration. Let's look internationally at a couple headlines also this week. So, in China, their carbon dioxide emissions have been flat or falling for the last 18 months, according to a piece by The Guardian. A rapid increase in wind and solar power capacity means emissions have remained flat, even though power demand is up. See, it can be done. Staying in Asia, a Monday car explosion in Delhi, which killed at least 8 people, and a Tuesday suicide bombing outside Islamabad have India and Pakistan on the brink of conflict for the second time this year. And in Palestine, Israeli settlers launched a series of arson attacks on a warehouse, a Bedouin village, and olive groves, continuing a spate of violence in the occupied territory that the UN said last month is the highest in at least 20 years. Now, IDF soldiers were there on the scene to disperse settlers and made a handful of arrests in a rare display of accountability, though it should be noted that 94% of investigations into offenses committed by Israelis against Palestinians are dropped without charges. Those couple international headlines there. Jennifer, anything stand out to you? Or if you want to go back to those U.S. headlines and pick one of those, you can too.
I don't know. You know what? There's just so much going on. I of course like the Epstein thing because it's just
We'll get there.
ridiculous.
Ridiculousness. We will cover plenty of that, believe me.
Okay, I pass. Let's go, Tabitha. I pass to you.
Well, actually, being from a farming community, there's always a big debate about what to do with solar panels, windmills, all that sort of thing. I think that Indiana actually has a lot of people that would be considered very conservative that are very concerned about CO2 emissions. And like with a lot of other things, their religion is being weaponized against them, and any compassion that they may have for the environment, nature, animals, or their fellow community members would sort of be lumped into the same sort of group. Not to mention that, everybody in the West has been raised essentially to villainize everything East. So I think, just being able to at least have a conversation about people in a different country that are doing good things that we could mirror, and that it doesn't have to be us that starts it. It's a conversation worth having.
Well, I definitely don't think we'll be the one leading the way for anything environmental, at least for the next 3 years. So,
certainly not. We got a lot of catching up to do, but it is encouraging to see, China, which has surpassed us as the world's top emitter, is getting on top of things before we are. So, and while they're growing,
Mm-hmm.
Last couple things in our.
Scott,
Sorry, Dee, go ahead.
This is more than just even an environmental thing. This is a national security issue.
Sure.
If indeed they get ahead with solar and wind and other sorts of projects, and we're still stuck on a grid somewhere, which everybody knows can be disabled by any number of foreign actors, we got a problem.
Well, on kind of the same subject, I was reading in the news this morning about just our power here in Indiana going up again. Like, we were warned about this when I ran for state representative in 2024. That was one of the things we talked about a lot. And the utilities are asking to be able to make another increase. So it's just in the last couple of years has just continued to go up.
it keeps going and going and going. And, you know, the more we get into AI and these data centers and their huge power demand, that's that's going to keep driving up prices. So, and we have to stay on top of that. And, you know, we'll be covering that story from all angles here. Last couple headlines before we turn to our big stories this week. Earlier this week, Republicans on the House Rules Committee voted no on an amendment to reopen the government that would have used money Trump committed to propping up the Argentinian economy to instead of extend Affordable Care Act subsidies here at home. Senate Democrats had been holding out for an extension of these subsidies, resulting in the longest ever government shutdown. Again, we're going to discuss that plenty here shortly. On Friday, the White House announced an executive order exempting certain food imports, coffee, tea, oranges, tomatoes, tropical fruits, and cocoa, among others, from reciprocal tariffs. In the case of the arsonist playing firefighter, the administration touted this effort to bring down grocery prices, despite their trade policies being responsible for much of the inflation in the first place. And finally, in this week's briefs, the British Broadcasting Corporation issued a public apology to President Trump over a misleading edit in a documentary about January 6th, though the edit, which made it seem as though Trump explicitly called for violence on that day, does in fact constitute a serious breach of journalistic ethics. The fact remains Trump did intend for violence on that day while maintaining plausible deniability. As such, the BBC rejected a demand to pay the president $1 billion in damage, which he has been calling for. And Jennifer, any closing thoughts on those?
You know, I hate that it happened just because it gives some power to, you know, people saying stuff that the media does. So that's not a good look on that. I was reading this morning, I think somebody lost their job. Maybe a few people lost their job there at the BBC. I'm sure he's still going to be screaming for that money. But then I also heard on the news this morning, as I was preparing for this, that a news article that Fox had done on Trump in regard to the Epstein scandal, they had also changed an interview as well to leave out some stuff. So sure. I don't know if that's
Oh yeah, and there was the whole Fox thing with the I'll release the files.
Yeah,
you know that one, and we're right. It seems they only make a big deal out of it when the other side is doing it, right?
Get some money out of it.
Listen, let's turn to our top stories this week, and we're going to talk about Venezuela and the drumbeat of war as the Trump administration continues to threaten the South American country. And in a way, we're going to continue with a British angle of all things. We were just talking about the BBC, but a row with the Brits over a documentary edit is one thing, but this week we also learned the UK is suspending intelligence sharing with the US military over concerns regarding the legality of American strikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. The United Kingdom believes, and rightly so, that these attacks are illegal under international law, and they don't want their people to wind up in The Hague over it. Now, meanwhile, Trump said he's sort of made up his mind on Venezuela after the military and senior staff gathered at the White House for at least 3 days of planning this week. It was reported that self-proclaimed Secretary of War Drinky Pete Hegseth and other defense officials presented the president with options for potential operations in Venezuela in the coming days, including strikes on land. Along these lines, the U.S. reopened a Puerto Rican naval base that has been shuttered for more than 20 years. Naval Station Roosevelt Roads had been closed since at least 2004, but has become home to 10 or more F-35 jets over the last couple months. And finally, on the Venezuela front, not directly related to the the press for war, but a report this week by Human Rights Watch and Cristosal says more than 250 Venezuelan men sent by the Trump regime to El Salvador endured systematic torture, abuse, and sexual assault during their detention at the sprawling Sikot concentration camp. The men were freed in July in a deal with Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro that included the release of 10 Americans from Venezuelan custody. So let's talk, ladies, about the drumbeat of war with Venezuela. We're about 20 boat strikes deep at this point, having killed scores of men, none of whom have been convicted in any court of law for drug trafficking. Likewise with, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Again, not a good guy by any stretch. Deserves to be overthrown by his own people. But again, hasn't been convicted in any court of law as being a member of a cartel. So listen, I think we're all old enough to remember Iraq and the lead up to that. I remember in the lead up to the election, they were talking about Trump as some sort of peace president. What happened? What happened?
Well, what happened, I think, is he's always had an issue with Venezuela for whatever reason. I'm not even sure, but he's never been, for years and years, he's talked about Venezuela. But I also think that it serves him well.
All right. Who's giving me the echoes?
I don't know. Some little kind of war, because then he can claim all kinds of wartime powers to do other things that he wants to do. He's looking for any and all reasons to be able to have war. First of all, make his Defense Department or whatever it's called now, buddies, happy. It will give him wartime powers because of whatever. The fact that Congress doesn't declare war seems to be irrelevant to him, and the Republicans in Congress certainly aren't standing up to him on anything else, so I'm not going to get all excited that they might do so now. And lastly, it's a very nice diversion for all that's really going on. That's look over here. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
I've definitely heard Wag the Dog mentioned multiple times this week, in regards to the Epstein files. Is this Venezuela thing a distraction from that? Tabitha, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I mean, let's just talk about the elephant in the room, right? Venezuela has a lot of oil. And when you mention Iraq, I was one of those students that, I was in university at that time when they decided that we're going over and, during that Afghanistan period. And I actually saw a lot of my classmates get sent to war, and I've seen a lot of them get brought back not okay, and certainly not the way that they were. It seems like the American public, a large portion of them, especially vets, might have voted for Trump because he said, we're not going to do that anymore. So this is certainly a betrayal to our vets, but also it seems very clear to me that the main motivation would be to access that oil. And as we know, we've often put our hands in different people's pots, if you will, whenever we have a motivation to get something from their country. That's my spin on it.
Yeah, and Jennifer, they mention the Monroe Doctrine a lot in this administration. This is like going back to 1820, right? The fifth president of the United States, who, basically declared that Latin America is the U.S.'s backyard. And, while I remember growing up, it was framed as, hey, we're not going to tolerate any of that colonialism stuff around here. We support democracy. It's been, hey, this is our territory. Back off. Is this just a continuation of that, Jennifer? Well, I know you spent time recently in Puerto Rico. They're opening up new or old military bases there.
Yes. Actually, we were down there. I spent a good portion of my time there. My husband is Puerto Rican via Brooklyn, but his family lives there. And we actually just a couple months ago went down by some of the bases, and you could see I can't think of the word, the total brain fart, but yes, you could see it very active when it wasn't, before you could
they're doing exercises there now.
Yeah, they're doing exercises. They're, it's kind of cool to see. I mean, the community's not really used to having that much there, but I mean, also part of colonialism too, as you brought that up, just the presence in Puerto Rico, and such a wonderful country.
Yeah, you know,
there's also
it seems. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Dee.
I'd forgotten about this. There's also a pretty big conspiracy theory out there that says that some of these dictator types want to split up the world, and that Trump thinks that he gets Greenland south, and Putin gets over there he gets Europe, and then China they get Asia, and then everybody will be happy because the dictators will have their parts of the world and so forth. And then we get oil, we get rare earth, we get lots of good minerals and stuff. I know that's a conspiracy theory, but I don't know.
Well, I mean that seems to be the way authoritarians work, right? They like divide up the bounty for themselves. Nationalists can do nationalist shit together. And
Well,
spheres of influence, right?
Let's not forget the fact that when we do start to have talks about war and putting bodies and boots on the ground, where they get those people. And Indiana would be a prime target for some of that because it's very rural. People don't have a lot of money. So of these large groups of people that voted for Trump and this anti-war movement, these are the same people that will be sent to these places. And I've actually heard myself some people that are veterans that are telling their own children, now's not a good time to sign up. And I think that's really telling because from areas like Indiana, where you have multiple generations that have participated in some type of conflict, for these same people to be telling their children, look, now's not the time, that really, I think, hits at the bedrock of a lot of these issues because we know where they're going to get these soldiers. And, we've already seen when the troops are being deployed, even if it's the National Guard, how they're being misused against the American people. Imagine how that is going to just traverse throughout the world. And I don't think the American people want that.
No. I think it's the same with just all of the policies that Trump has been making. It really hits his base, I think, the hardest. And I feel it's just really disturbing to see how people just don't get that. Although I think that more and more people are waking up to it. I mean, the things that have gone on in the last several weeks, it's like we're living in the twilight zone.
Yeah, it really is. We talked about this Tuesday. I had a live stream. Derek Holder and Chuck Gill were with me. Blythe Potter stopped by for Veterans Day, and it is one of the things we talked about is how the military industrial complex uses scarcity to hoover up new recruits, right? And here they go. They're going to send you to Venezuela for the oil, or my God, they might send you to Chicago to fire on your own citizens if they keep things up at this rate. And you know what? It all goes to show, like, in contrast, this buildup has continued over the last 40 plus days while the government's been shut down, right? We always have the resources for war and conquest, but don't have the resources to take care of people. It's astounding, really. And I do want to move on to the government shutdown this week, which finally came to an end. Now, this is the longest government shutdown in U.S. history is over. On Monday, Senate Democrats, the Senate passed a bill to reopen the government as 7 Democrats and 1 Angus King, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats, reached an agreement with Republicans to break the stalemate. The legislation includes a minibus of 3 one-year appropriations bills, including full funding of SNAP benefits through next September, and keeps the government open through January 30th, which is only a few weeks away, when we might have to do this all over again. The 8 senators facilitating this deal were the aforementioned King of Maine, fellow New Englanders Jeanne Shaheen and Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, Catherine Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen of Nevada, John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, Limp Dick Durbin of Illinois, and the leader of this rat pack, Tim Kaine of Virginia. Now, if you couldn't tell from my tone, I am skeptical of this agreement, but some Democrats say they scored some real wins in the deal. particularly for federal workers who have been under broad attack by the regime hatchet man Russell Vogt. The deal included the reinstatement of federal employees who had been laid off during the shutdown and includes language barring future mass firings for the duration of, again, this very short agreement. What is not included is a compromise on health care. Democrats did not win an extension of ACA subsidies, but did secure a pinky swear promise by Senate Republicans to hold a vote on it by the middle of December. Of course, House Speaker Mike Tiny Johnson has made no such similar pledge. Now, Dee shared a Democratic defense of the deal on her Facebook page, which I may not agree with, but I thought was a very cogent, well-articulated defense of the agreement, and I will quote from it liberally right now. So, says some folks are already melting down and accusing the Dems of caving because they get nothing out of the deal. I'm some folks. Everyone knows the vote will fail, they say, so they get nothing. Dems caved again. But wait, let's do a deeper dive. This post says you will see that getting that agreement is a brilliant strategic move, even if the vote fails. So consider. The ACA enhanced subsidies are set to automatically sunset in December if no congressional action is taken to extend them. If there is no deal before then, they just go away on their own. 2, there is no way in hell the Republicans were going to agree to extend the subsidies, no matter how firmly the Democrats held their ground. Maybe. 3, if the Democrats insisted on keeping the government closed in order to protect the subsidies, at the end of September, the subsidies would have gone away, the Dems would have gotten nothing, and people would have suffered an extended shutdown without getting anything in return. And this would have happened without the Republicans having to do anything and bearing no responsibility for the subsidies' disappearance. So, when the subsidies disappeared in December, people who are affected would have blamed the Democrats, not the Republicans, according to this post. By exacting an agreement from Senate Majority Leader John Thune for a vote to extend the subsidies, the Democrats are now forcing the Republicans to affirmatively end the subsidies rather than just letting them die a natural death. Every Republican will have to go on record, while every Democrat can be on record voting yes. And while it is possible that every Republican will vote no, it is possible that the Dems could peel off enough Republicans to vote to extend the subsidies. It would only take a couple, and if they put the pressure on over the next few weeks, that could actually happen. If the Democrats can get enough Republican votes to save the subsidies, that will be a huge win, and if the Republicans stand firm and vote no, they will own the expiration of the subsidies, not the Democrats. The bottom line is that the subsidies were going to end in December, no matter what the Dems did, but now if the deal goes through, if they do end, it will be because the Republicans voted not to extend them, not because they quietly went away. And if they can get enough Republicans on board, which is more possible than it was just even a week ago, they will save the subsidies. The vote will ensure that either the subsidies are extended or the Republicans' fingerprints are all over the expiration, neither of which could happen without holding a vote. Now, Dee, you shared the post. Do you agree with the post?
Yes, sir, I do. Let me first say that I lived through the last 2 Trump shutdowns as a Fed. And so I know what it's like not to get paid, etc. And I know what it looks like to get him to come back. So even before I talk about the cave, we have to go back to the big ugly bill and recall that it was passed under reconciliation, which means there is no 60 vote threshold to invoke cloture, to use all those fancy words. It means you can't vote for it. And this is what all the Democrats did, was invoke cloture so it could be voted on this time. However, back then, the Republicans made it crystal clear, as they have for 15 years, that they ain't doing nothing to help the ACA survive. In fact, they'd like to get rid of it entirely. And this is just one way to start killing it a little bit at a time. So back to the cave. Let me tell you, the Republicans are never going to enhance the ACA. Never. I don't care how much so-called pressure you put on anybody. They are never going to do that. So the options were to continue to have people not be able to make their house payments. to continue SNAP people to have to hope they can get some food at a food bank somewhere because they don't got any groceries this week. The option was to continue to let people suffer, which progressives and Democrats don't like. We don't like people to suffer. We like to help them get to where they need to be. So they got SNAP extended and increased, and it's not in the CR. It goes to the end of appropriations, September 30th. That's off the table. That's no longer a bouncing ball that we can starve people in order to get something going on. They got all the federal workers rehired since Trump came on, not just the ones who were laid off during shutdown. Nobody is even paying attention to that. The guaranteed back pay, which he was signing an executive order that he wasn't going to give them. You can't tell people that they missed their last 3 paychecks and then expect them to stay even. Well, that's because they want to get rid of federal people as well, of course, but that's a whole nother day. Anyway, so Republicans had hoped to slink into next year with zero accountability, even though in the big ugly bill, they're the ones that sunsetted the ACA subsidies. They're the ones that did that, and they were not going to be held accountable by the Democrats, which I agree, it was hard after holding out that long, but we couldn't watch people go hungry and lose their houses. That had to happen by getting Thune to agree that there would be a vote. They will be on record. Oh, everybody says, okay, great. They're not going to have a vote. He'll just not have a vote. Then they'll also be on record as being liars, and we can pound the hell out of them with that. In fact, the Republicans caved. They're in the majority. They're in the majority of the executive, both chambers of commerce of the Congress. No, Democrats had zero power. That was, yes, the only power we had was to withhold cloture. But you can only go so far, and we got a lot out of them. I'm telling you, at the end of the year, even if they vote on it, they will go on record as being against ACA subsidies, I think.
So, Dee, yeah, I guess let me ask. Wasn't the shutdown already around Republicans' necks? I mean, they were paying the price for it. They were getting the blame in all the polls. That the off-year elections recently, Republicans got hammered. They were taking the blame for all of this, and I feel like did Democrats give them an out just from an optics standpoint? And listen, I get it. I am a Democrat. I am a liberal. I believe in government, that it is necessary for a society to function, and as such, federal workers, we need them. Doesn't it look like just here's Democrats kind of doing this for a constituency of theirs? The federal employees are largely a Democratic voting bloc. To the people whose healthcare is doubling, tripling, or quadrupling, I don't think they much care that these federal employees are getting their jobs back. And just from an optics standpoint, don't you have to maximally resist this administration at every turn and never cave? I don't know, Jennifer. What am I missing?
I don't know. What are we missing? We're missing a president that cares about our country, that can lead us. I don't think anybody thought that the Republicans were going to do anything to help people with healthcare, and it will be, I don't even want to say interesting. I really fear for what's going to happen next year with people in healthcare. I already work with a lot of folks that have a hard time getting healthcare. It doesn't matter if you have very little money, or if you are just starting out, or like myself, I'm a business owner. I've been for several years. I have used all different types of insurance. And when I was starting my business, I needed to use the marketplace because I had to take that leap to start my own business, and I needed that. So I don't know how I would have done that without that. I've used a COBRA plan. I've been on Medicaid. There's so many different types of health insurances out there, and this is one that has helped many, many people. So I think I hear the latest is I think Trump just wants to have his name attached to it. He just doesn't want Obamacare in the name. He's already talking about, Trump care or whatever, which is like, I don't know. I
Listen, if we could single payer universal health care in this country, I'll let them call it whatever the hell they want.
That's it.
That's true.
That's the
That's
solution.
true. But I don't
Right?
think that's what he has in mind. I mean,
call it Trump care. Fine, great, do it.
Care.
but I don't think that's what he has in mind. He's not going to. I
No,
mean,
absolutely not.
really been anything that he's done to help the average person besides
So
take things away.
Remembering
let me-
too that this is
go ahead, Dee.
to me this is a discussion about political strategy. Political strategy is generally not pretty, and we don't know all the pieces that go into any strategic thing that happens. I think the Democrats were masterful, and bravo to them for getting what they got, because they were on the road to getting jack squat. So they got a lot. And we have to push and say, okay, you're going to kill ACA, then we want Medicare for all, universal health care, Trump care. I don't give a damn what you call it. But get people covered so Jennifer doesn't have to worry if she can take care of whomever she's responsible for. And so Tabitha can take care of that. I have a child that doesn't have any insurance whatsoever and has 2 autistic children. They can't even afford the marketplace. So we need to get that off the table so that people can go about their lives and get things done. And I don't know if this will push it that direction or not. That's not either on the table. But we have to fix this healthcare issue. And, I don't agree with giving more money to insurance companies either. But you can't let people not have insurance, because we all pay for it when they go to the ER and it gets funneled back to us. All of our costs go up. It's just stupid.
That's like that with everything. Oh.
Well, I was gonna let me put another thing on the record before we continue the discussion here. So who felt pain and put pressure on these 8 Democrats to make an agreement? Whose suffering were they looking to alleviate this from the lever? Now, according to David Sirota's publication there, of the 8 who caved, number 1, none of them are up for re-election in 2026, and 7 of them are the top Democratic recipients of campaign contributions from the airline industry. So air carriers were losing upwards of $100 million a day in staffing-related delays and cancellations, and since 2019, over $750,000 went to 7 of the 8 lawmakers who flipped their vote to reopen the government without securing the extended ACA subsidies. $218,000 alone of that went to Senator Jackie Rosen of Nevada, who counted airlines as one of her top industry donors last election cycle, right behind healthcare and insurance. Now, however, despite the shutdown coming to an end, flight disruptions could linger for some time. Tabitha, whose suffering are these 8 really looking to alleviate?
Well, I don't know if we spoke about this, but I used to be a flight attendant for 17 years. And so I know quite a bit about the airline industry. And I can tell you that there are quite a few of the airlines that contributed a substantial amount of money to presidential campaigns and to other elected officials. Yet I think they have played their cards plainly, if you will, because there are some union negotiations right now that are stalled. And I think things like this are just glaring examples of the rich versus poor sort of mentality. There's no motivation for them besides making more money. It seems clear that they are not interested in providing their employees with a better quality of life, better working circumstances, and all of that. So the airline stuff, man, just pure greed, have to say. I have a lot of friends of mine that are flight attendants, pilots, rampers. Everybody is in a worse position now than they were when I started. I think I started in 2006. There's been a lot of things go negatively in the airline industry. And by campaign contributions, I think it seems clear where that's going. In relation to other things with healthcare, MedWise just got dropped in Indiana. There's a lot of families with autism that their secondary insurance or their primary insurance would be some Medicaid variation. I know we're going to be speaking about the autism stuff later on, but since Dee brought it up already, these families are already struggling. So you're just seeing an overlap in a lot of things of people suffering and knowing they're going to suffer. And I think what I've seen from just regular people is they were bracing for impact. They knew what was coming, and they're looking for politicians that have a spine. And these 8, excuse me, but they don't have a fucking spine. And there are plenty of people that have shown they have no freaking spine, and it's disgusting. And I don't think that it's just disgusting to the Democrats. I think it's disgusting to the Republicans, to the libertarians, and all. And there are certain issues, right? Like disability, autism, ABA services. If you have an elderly grandmother, someone in your family that has access to SNAP, you just go down the line. And it just seems clear that these politicians, most of them that are saying nothing, right? That I think is something worth talking about too. The ones that have nothing to say, that are putting party over family, party over community. All of those people need to go because they have now shown the American public, the Hoosiers, the autism community, they don't give a damn about any of us, and they'll let all of us burn.
Yeah. Dee, I don't know. What do you think? Is this?
Well,
am I being too harsh? Is this just how the sausage is made?
Well, it is how the sausage is made. Actually, politics is the art of compromise, and the Republicans have not compromised one damn bit. And so, getting anything out of them when they're in entire control of the government is a big deal. Now, I missed a funeral out of state last week because my flight was canceled. People across the country missed stuff and are missing, as et cetera. They felt a great deal of heat to get things back on the road before the holidays because that's when their traffic is the highest. I get that. That to me leads into a whole nother issue, and that is Citizens United, and that is campaign contributions, that is public financing of campaigns. That would go so far to take all of this corruption and all of this payoff by large corporations, which is all crap. I agree. But
okay, are we ever going to get rid of that crap when you've got people like these 8 in the Senate, though?
Well, oh, you absolutely can. You absolutely can. But it has to be on the table. Right. What was on the table at the time was not that. That's another thing we could spend 3 weeks talking about. What was on the table was, are people going hungry? Are people going to make it to their funerals? Are people going to be able to make their house payments, etc.? Indiana has a gigantic number. We have thousands, 30 or 40,000 federal workers in this state. And a lot of them work down at Crane, but they work all over the state. They too weren't getting any paychecks. The contractors that work for those agencies never get a paycheck. Whatever they lose, they lose. They're done. So it's a lot, and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people were harmed by all of what was going on. And I think it's the appropriate thing to do and the moral thing to do to get what you can and keep rolling.
Well, if we were going to bend over for them, why go through this whole thing in the first place and go through the shutdown? Why not just,
there never would have been any concessions made. They wouldn't have got anything, and we would have got to the end of the year, and it somehow would have been the Democrats' fault.
Did we get anything but a pinky swear and a handful of magic beans?
No, they got all the things back. They got the SNAP benefits extended, all that stuff I talked about earlier. The pinky promise is irrelevant. Either they vote for it and show us on the record what they do, or they're liars and they didn't vote for it, and we beat the hell out of them with that. Either way works.
One last thing on this, and then I'll get your comment, Jennifer, before we move to the next topic. So, besides the big airlines, another group who scored a win in ending the shutdown are a group of senators whose phone records had been obtained by special counsel Jack Smith during his investigation into Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election. A provision just slipped into the language of the agreement allows the 8 Republican senators to sue the government if the records had been subpoenaed without their knowledge. Now, Speaker Little Johnson says the House will vote next week to remove this language, which even House Republicans are calling self-serving and self-dealing. We'll see what comes of that. Jennifer, last word on the shutdown before we move
on. This is neither a Democrat nor Republican issue I'm going to bring up, but we talk a lot about the health insurance. We talk a lot about the food, but one thing we don't talk about at all is the mental health of people. I could not imagine why anybody would want to be a federal worker. This is, to have to wonder at the end of the year when you're headed to winter and the holidays, are you going to get paid? I mean, I don't know who else in this country works a job not knowing when they're going to get a paycheck. And just that is just another thing I wanted to throw in there, because I was supposed to fly somewhere last week and we ended up driving. It wasn't even related because we had planned the trip a little bit early on, but it just kind of reminded me when one of my son-in-laws was working for TSA and how stressful that was on his family when they were just starting out. Like, this is just snowballs, even for people that are in the middle of, buying a house. And we know how hard that is for people now. So there's just a lot more. I was surprised that they caved. I kept saying the Democrats are not going to give in. It's really about the health, the healthcare to me, because that just snowballs everything. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, this any given week, this probably your top story, and for whatever political price the Democrats may have paid for caving, it sort of disappeared immediately because this week we got huge developments in this Epstein scandal, which is ongoing now. Wednesday, the newest member of Congress, Arizona's Adelita Grijalva, was sworn into office, ending 7 weeks of limbo after her special election victory. Her first official order of business was to sign a discharge petition, making her the 218th and final vote needed to force a floor vote compelling Trump's DOJ to release everything they know about Epstein. Earlier that same day, her new House Democratic colleagues released 3 previously unseen Epstein emails, which referenced Trump, including a 2011 message with co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell referring to the now president as, quote, the dog that hasn't barked, and alleging Trump had spent hours at Epstein's house with one of the victims. Furthermore, correspondences between Epstein and journalist Michael Wolff suggest Trump knew about the girls and had far deeper relationship with the convicted sex trafficker than he has previously acknowledged. The next day, the Republican-controlled House Oversight Committee then released a trove of more than 23,000 Epstein-related documents showing a wide variety of folks involved with the disgraced financier, including a counsel in Obama's office, including former President Clinton, including Deepak Chopra, Bill Gates. I think I saw the Dalai Lama in there somewhere. It just showing the depth of the elite folks in this country, complicity with this fellow. Folks were very comfortable in many of these emails. Larry Summers was in there. Again, this is well after he had first been convicted of sex offenses in Florida. And these folks were just very comfortable. It was like an inside joke with them. Very concerning. We saw that Epstein was advising Russians on how to deal with Trump. There's for all of the information out there, there are more questions, I think, now than there were even before. And so in response to this, of course, where Trump is deeply implicated in all of these emails, he responds by directing his DOJ to investigate Epstein's relationships with Clinton and with all the other figures, particularly Democrats, who were named in these emails. So I want to open up the discussion. Let's see, Tabitha, let me come to you to start this one. What were your takeaways from all of these Epstein emails this week?
Okay, so I've got 3 little kids that have autism. The likelihood of someone that is under the age of 14 that has autism, irregardless if they are female or male, being sexually assaulted in some fashion is in the 90th percentile. Taking that into account, and the fact that I would consider myself a humanist, and I grew up in the Christian faith. The level of disgust that I have for this person and everyone that attaches themselves in some fashion to him, I don't even have the words for it. But basically, I just feel like nail all of their asses to the wall. And the type of America that I grew up in and the type of people that I grew up around, these strong farming people, a lot of people, help their community. There are things that transcend religion and your affiliation to political party. And the men that I grew up around that influenced me aren't doing this shit. And I think that we have an opportunity as a country. Like if we want to rally behind something, this is it. Just go through and find everybody, no matter how much money they have, and just nail their asses to the wall and make sure that this kind of shit doesn't ever happen again. And then when we fix it in this country, then start to go and help other countries with it. Because we know, we're all aware how big the problem is with human trafficking. And it's not as simple as color. A lot of these girls, a lot of people would consider them like the, American pageantry sort of personality. They're white, Caucasian, blue eyes, blonde hair. And, for those people that are a little racist still, and, look, I don't consider myself a racist, but for those people that are making excuses for this kind of shit, put your daughter, your cousin, your sister, your, kid across the street, put these kids in those places, and then look yourself in the mirror and have a natural reaction to these motherfuckers. I'm so sorry. Like, it disgusts me on a level that I consider myself a very nonviolent person. But if you're not having a guttural response to this kind of shit, like, you really need to look yourself in the mirror.
It's a really good point, Tabitha. And you mentioned, the men that you grew up around. If they would have caught wind of this shit, they'd kick somebody's ass. And that goes across party lines. That's just basic human decency. And it even goes to show, like, listen, we're talking about this discharge petition. There are at least 4 Republican women who have committed to signing on to this thing: Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace. And they had Boebert in the Situation Room this week, basically begging her not to sign on to this thing. And it turns out there may be more than 4. Word on the street, D, is that there are dozens, scores, maybe into the hundreds of Republicans who will sign on this thing if it reaches critical mass. I think they just don't want to be the one that gets out in front of it, right?
Right. There's political, and then there's personal. Personally, my friend Linda Lawson would say, F the patriarchy. This has been going on throughout history. These white,
exactly.
Adult men think they can do whatever the hell they want with whomever the hell they want. This piece just throws in rich people who then have the way to cover themselves and kind of have a little club about it all. But I know about 2 women in my old life that were not abused as children by somebody. It's just what has gone on. And I'm glad that it's out, because if we can take down these rich SOBs, then we can start to change, I hope, the culture that we have. But right now, it's the opposite. Right now, the culture says women get back in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant so we can do whatever the hell we want. Now, that's what I see going on politically. This is a chess game of three-dimensional. They are working all the pieces that they can, every way that they can, to try and escape responsibility for it. They used, the Republicans, being they, because I don't believe in cutting up Democrats unless it's absolutely necessary, okay? Because they're the ones doing it, so let's pick on them. They used the Epstein files throughout these elections to say, oh, these Democrats are the ones that are all in there. Look at it, it's Bill Clinton. Look at it, so and such and so and so. It's not us. And then when they got elected, and their people, their MAGAs, came to them and said, okay, now give us the Epstein files. Ruh-roh. Now what are we going to do? We actually got elected, and they actually care, and they care a lot. And so the Democrats masterfully have kept this on the front page. They don't want it to go away like everything else does because of whatever is the travesty of the day. There is, yes, a rumor that it may pass the House unanimously, because nobody wants to go on the record as being for child molesters.
Exactly.
Now they're arguing. Now they're arguing. You heard Megyn Kelly's piece this week?
Oh my God, that woman!
I was just about to bring that up.
I was going to bring it up. I cannot believe. I mean, I can believe her.
We've learned a new word. Why pedophilia only goes to people that are under 14. If you're over 14, it's, I don't know, hedgephilia, some word I never even heard before. Oh, really?
Yes. The Republicans' 2026 platform is, well, actually, it's ephebophilia. Okay, who's going to vote for that?
Right, I never even heard that word before. Who cares?
She's always, I don't know. She's always doing something stupid like that.
So politically, the reason I am fairly well convinced today, I may change tomorrow, but remember, I have a lot of opinions. I'm convinced today that the reason that Trump said, okay, well, let's go look at everybody but me, right, and the Epstein files, is to try and shut his base up, first of all. But secondly, their argument about, well, why didn't Biden come out and beat him up with the Epstein files? Well, first of all, we don't do that. Secondly, it's probably illegal. But most importantly, those records were under seal because they were using them to prosecute Ghislaine Maxwell. You couldn't pull them out because you couldn't do that. This action by him potentially puts those under seal so that they cannot come out, thereby giving the House that I'll vote unanimously. Yes, I'm all for it, but they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, about Ghislaine Maxwell, Jennifer, let me ask you about this. Did you see this one this week? So, apparently, remember when Todd Blanche, the number 2 guy at the DOJ, went down to Florida to visit her in prison a couple months ago, and after she gave this, very, very nice statement saying she never saw Donald Trump do anything untoward, they moved her to like this Club Fed style prison camp in Texas, where this week we learned she gets private meals, she gets a puppy, she gets yoga. Really nice setup, like, as Dee was saying, if you've got the resources, and as Tabitha is saying, if maybe you're internationally connected, as the Maxwell family were, maybe, you can have nice things like this. And apparently, she's angling for a commutation. Trump even said he didn't rule it out. So what do you think, Jennifer?
I mean, I don't think anybody was surprised what was going on when, what's his name, went to talk with her. I mean, I think that is why Republicans are willing to have these reports come out about the Epstein, because what are you going to do? I mean, there's just so much out there. And, but before you started on her, I do want to say something about this, because I think it is important that we also recognize and thank Virginia Guthrie's family for also keeping this in the news. I mean, every single day they were out there And, we need to always bring up her name when we're talking about this, because she gave up so much, her entire life. And then she took her own life, and she left us that book, which, came out shortly after she took her life. So, her family has worked very, very hard. I just can't imagine the pain that they go through every single day. Like, just as Democrats, we know what it's like to be fighting the good fight, knowing we're right, and fighting up against these people, and to have your daughter, your sister, your friend, as part of this. And I'm sure it's even more horrible than we think. I mean, being a young girl and dealing with my brain is not working today. July, the lady in prison, I cannot think of her name. She's not even a lady. The monster in prison that we're talking about, she is just one of the worst ones, a woman. She really betrayed all of these women. It's even more than, sexual abuse in itself is damn awful. And it's also the secondary part of that is being manipulated by somebody that it sounds like, they built relationships with her and trusted her. So I don't know. We don't know how any of this is going to play out. Absolutely no idea. I don't think he's going to be quick to do anything right now. I mean, everything doesn't really even lay on what she says anymore. I mean, she's been proven to be a liar consistently this whole time.
Yeah. Tabitha, I'm going to ask you to close out this section by asking you, is Trump ever going to face any consequences for this? Will he lose his presidency? Will he be forced to resign? Will he ever see the inside of a jail cell?
Well, to be completely honest with you, I don't even think Trump is at the reins anymore. And I think most people that have been paying attention really know that. You have people that are unelected acting representatives in our government, like Russell Vought, for example, who are just creating carnage everywhere they go. And then, everything bounces back to 2025. And it just seems like that playbook is just rolling out like it's supposed to. And what we should really be worried about is that the actors behind the screen, if you will, they've been at this for a very long time. They're very motivated to get the things done that they want done. And it seems like Trump's on his way out, and they're grooming JD Vance now to take his place. And I think these type of individuals are the dangerous ones. The females that are taking up the mantle, that are painting a picture that is not true, that are trying to manipulate the American people's inner compassion for certain events. These are the really scary actors that we have. And couple that with all of these politicians that mum's the word. They are falling in line, and they're not willing to break rank. And quite frankly, I think that's anti-American. And then for all of it, I'm agreeing with what Jennifer is saying. But considering that we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of this nation, and that a British national infiltrated and manipulated and exploited and abused these young American girls, who some of them came from very poor families, some of them, got kicked out of their homes. We have people in the U.S. right now living on the street, living in their cars that don't have food. And this SOB, I don't care how much money she came from. If you just think about that for a second, that these politicians are willing to sacrifice American children, white American children, for some foreign national that's a piece of shit. Like, I don't care, woman, man, trans, whatever. There are just things that are wrong. And if you can't now, of all the things going on, if you can't take a stance on this kind of shit, you're not a human being. Like, this transcends Republican, Democrat, or whatever. And that's why I just keep going back to this, because I'm from a really red part of the state, and I've not given up on these people yet. And I really feel like there's a lot of areas of Indiana right now that they may not realize it, but they're like internally the way that they operate and the way that they see their communities, those standards that they hold for one another, they are more democratic than anything. And all of this stuff, I think at the end is going to blow up in these politicians' faces, because when people really start to sit down and have these serious conversations at their dinner tables and start to think of it like that, these Epstein survivors, they could have been kids at our schools that went to school with our children. They could have been our children, and that we have an obligation as Americans to stand up for these women. Think of how brave they were, how scary that must have been. All this horrible shit that happened to them when they were kids that they had to live through, the multi-generational effects that left them, that they were left holding the bag for these monsters. And now we're even entertaining a conversation about letting this monster out. I think the American people will hold them accountable, and it's not going to matter whether it's Trump or whoever, but these politicians better think about that, because I don't think this shit's going away.
There is, Tabitha, and you mentioned it in there, and you so poignantly talked about, these girls that had to go through these things, and the effects on their lives, and I don't want to minimize that, so I want to hold on to that for just a second, before we talk about politics of it again, and turn to what you hinted at is that there is a MAGA civil war brewing, because Trump is cooked. If his term in office isn't cooked, his brain is cooked. The man's got pudding between the ears at this point. So we're seeing in real time his coalition, the people in it are angling to steer the ship once the captain finally keels over. So recently we've seen division within the MAGA ranks over a young streamer named Nick Fuentes. I don't know if you folks are familiar with this guy, but he is a 27-year-old who broadcasts out of his suburban Chicago home. Was recently, this kid is notorious for being a neo-Nazi, like unrepentant, is a white supremacist, Christian nationalist, anti-Semite, and that is increasingly becoming the direction of a large part of the party. I've seen that 30 to 40% of young staffers in Washington are followers of Fuentes, something that's called Groypers, is the name of that movement. And recently, this MAGA civil war burst out into the open when Fuentes was platformed by Tucker Carlson. And Carlson has been pinch hitting on these Turning Point USA rallies. He was here in Bloomington not long ago, pinch hitting for the late Charlie Kirk at the this college tour. And Carlson has been in media for a long time. He's very much regarded as sort of fringe, but I mean, the man was on Fox News #1 rated cable host for many years. So, a very important figure on the right. Had this Fuentes on for a softball interview. Very, very many folks in MAGA circles, particularly those who have an affinity for Israel, like Ben Shapiro, like Mark Levin. These guys are incensed that Carlson is inviting the little Nazi Fuentes in under the tent, and so they are none too pleased about it. So we have this Groyper faction of the party. We also have Marjorie Taylor Greene angling for a more prominent role. Maybe she is going to be the queen of MAGA going forward. Like we said earlier, she was party to this discharge petition, right? She has called out Trump regarding the Epstein handling. And this week, Trump disavowed Marjorie Taylor Greene in a long Truth Social screed. So there is another faction within the party. We see Vance obviously angling for something called, I want to point people to this week's episode of the Straight White American Jesus podcast, very good. The folks over there at Access Mundi Media, Brad Onishi, they talk about something called civilizational nationalism. This movement kind of describes the camp that Vance and Kevin Roberts and the Heritage Foundation fall into. So we're seeing camps form within the MAGA brand. We also saw pushback this week in an interview Trump did with Fox News' Laura Ingraham. He floated the idea of 50-year mortgages, and folks in MAGA were incensed by that. Again, pushing back against Trump more than we've seen recently. And also, he in the same interview, he talked about the need for Americans to keep using H-1B visas to hire foreign workers, and this is all the far right has been talking about on Twitter all week, even Indiana Twitter, like the H-1B visas. We've got guys posing as journalists online, digging up like every H-1B worker in Indiana, and talking about needing to hire what they call heritage Americans for these jobs. Meanwhile, Trump's like, no, legitimately, we don't have the talent in the country for some of these jobs. And pains me to say on this one, Donald Trump is right. And yeah, the racist faction doesn't like that. So, D, let me ask, MAGA Civil War, who's in charge of this thing?
Well, I'm afraid nobody is in charge. I think it's pretty apparent in the big picture that Trump has lost his handle on what's going on. I think it's probably in large part due to Epstein and the shutdown sort of things. It's become apparent to many of the base, I think, that he doesn't give a flying damn about any of them. But so, yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious. But here's what I worry about is J.D. Vance. If he would come in because, Trump drops dead, he won't get 25th Amendment out. Nobody's got that nerve. But if anything happens to him, I've heard people say, oh, he's going to resign. No, he's not. Narcissists don't quit. Then we have J.D. Vance, who is fully funded by Peter Thiel and the Elon Musks of the world that want to take things over and look at people even more as widgets and less as people, items to be shuffled around as they need. But say even that doesn't work. Say for some reason J.D. Vance also gets pushed out. Then we're looking at Mike Johnson as president of the United States of America. Okay. Next would be John Thune, who probably is the best of everybody I just named.
I was going to say, of these options, Thune is probably the least offensive, though he does suck out loud. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, pretty much. But, he's just as, he's got nothing that they all don't have either. But then you go in order of succession in the cabinet as to the ones that were created. And so I think you start with, I know what the second and third one are, the Secretary of State. So that would be Marco Rubio, would be president. If we then went to Secretary of the Treasury, which is next, that would be who? Scott Bessent. Oh, goody. And then if we went to Secretary of Defense, you'd have Pete Hegseth or Kegsbreath, whatever, in charge of the country. So that scares me worse than about anything else, is looking at the line of succession, if indeed he does go. The good news, if they succeed in pulling, if somehow we pull Epstein out and it becomes obvious that, Trump is in 2,300 emails, he's mentioned 1,600 plus times, the most of anybody else except Epstein. If indeed it happens and he gets pulled back, well, I think then you'll start seeing some Republicans abandon ship and have the nerve to stand up against him. But again, it's like the Epstein vote. Only when there's some cover for them will they do that.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, what do you think? So, now listen, D, I don't think we're Trump's going to resign or get thrown out of there, or we'll have to worry about the line of succession or anything. But just in terms of like the MAGA movement and the direction of the Republican Party, the direction of the right wing in this country. I mean, are the Groypers, are the Fuenteses, are the neo-Nazis the direction this thing is going? Or are the neocons like the Rubios, like maybe your John Thune, like your Ben Shapiro, are those folks making a comeback? What do you think?
I think that they've been given permission to be bad, and so therefore they are. But I think that there are more of us than there are them, and that's one reason why we have to hang together, or we will most assuredly hang separately. We have to stand up with. That's where party comes in, can be valuable. No, party is not everything, but party is important, and we have to hang together and get these people back in the shadows where they belong, so that we can have governance and a country again. They're not doing anything even closely related to governance. All they're doing is destroying and stealing and cheating and taking whatever they can to stuff their pockets while they have a chance.
Jennifer, who do you cheer for? Who do you cheer for there in a fight between horrible people and horrible factions? Do you hope for like the simultaneous knockout? Oh, hold on there.
You're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Well, I want to backtrack first for a second. When you started to ask me something, I want to say something about Trump. I feel like we've already seen this, that his health is going to continue to deteriorate. I don't care how much you pretend that things can't bother you. On some level, there is just so much stuff out there that even though the man has no conscience, you can already see some of the things with his house. So, but as far as who I want to win out of the worst of the worst, I know that there are Republicans out there, or a lot that aren't even in office anymore, that do care about this country. And we need some of those people back. We need some of those people ones that are waking up. People can be fooled, and many, many people have been fooled by Trump, and there are people that are speaking out. So, it doesn't really matter what we wish, they're going to fight it out within their party, the extreme people there. But we just need to get back to some kind of government where all of us are putting the American people first. That's who I'm voting for right there. It is the American people to be the winners out of all this bullshit.
100%. Tabitha, what do you think? Is the MAGA coalition crumbling? And number one, I think that's a good thing, right? But what do you see, blooming as it crumbles? What fills that void?
I think we need to be really cautious because with things like racism and bigotry, we know they have deep roots, and this isn't something that's just going to go away. Clearly, I think what I observed from a lot of this was I thought that a lot of this bad activity was farther below the surface than it really was. And if anything, this just showed me that a lot of these bad and ill-intentioned type of things were just bubbling slightly under the surface. So I think that we should be focusing our energy on things like helping our community organization, but most of all the young people. So these Groypers, for example, I'm paying close attention to that because I have a nephew about that age. And I think my nephew is a kind human, but it brings to light some things that maybe we need to pay more attention to. Like we need to pay more attention to what our youngsters have access to. And if there is something like that we can't limit their access, we need to give an alternative. So we need, like those of us that care, need to be like literally physically getting out there with these kids to show them what goodness, humility, and like community connection is really about. And if we don't do those type of things, we are creating a vacuum for those that will fill it. And I think that's what we're seeing, especially with the Marjorie Taylor Greens and people like that. The Democratic Party is failing in some of those areas. I think that's part of why we failed in the previous election. We created a vacuum for all of these people that felt that they weren't being represented. And then there were people that were willing to take up that mantle that were more extreme and had hidden agendas that I think most people don't agree with, but they weren't aware of. And they're giving little bits here and there. Obviously, the Epstein stuff, that's a massive wave, right? But for how long? And that's why I think it's important that we just keep, pushing the pedal to the metal, if you will, those of us that are aware and are paying attention, to just bring back that community spirit of like educating people, being present, providing an alternative for a lot of these really heinous things. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be a long road, because these people on the other side that were building all of this nasty, horrible crap, they've been at it for 40 or 50 years. So we need to really think about, our commitment to our communities and like how much we're willing to invest in everyone to really turn this tide, because it's going to take all of us.
You're right, and I'm glad you mentioned the effect that like this manosphere and folks like Fuentes have on young men, and I think I have the solution. I'm gonna tie this back into the shutdown and the airlines that prop up those 8 senators. Boys love trains, right? Listen, I'm going to be 47 years old next year, and I am still a 5-year-old boy at heart, and I love choo-choos, and we need high-speed rail. the young men in this country, I think, are like me. We're all 4-year-old boys in there somewhere, and we all love choo-choo trains. And if we gave the next generation of this country like a big national infrastructure project, like building nationwide high-speed rail, that would give our young men purpose. Something that folks like Nick Fuentes tap into now is that lack of purpose. That would be a big unifying project. But unfortunately, folks like the airlines would never, ever let us build high-speed rail in this country. They've been trying really hard to keep it from getting done forever. So listen, I think what I'm trying to say is it's the airlines' fault that young men are choosing fascism. So let's put an end to that. Let us move on and talk about our Indiana stories this week, though. In a segment I like to call Around the Corn. I'm going to go through these quick headlines really quick because I want to get Dee's last words before she's got to run here in about 10 minutes. So this week, some state legislatures want to slash the state's roster of more than 250 boards and commissions, according to the indispensable Capitol Chronicle out of Indiana, the Indiana Capitol Chronicle out of Indianapolis. Nikki Kelly, great job up there. Anyway, follow them. According to the ICC, leaders of the General Assembly's Government Reform Task Force are planning to sponsor a bill in the upcoming session with the goal of eliminating or consolidating an undetermined number of those entities. Another area of government Hoosier Republicans have been looking to slash is the role of township trustee, and that case may have been bolstered this week when a former Columbus township trustee pled guilty to 17 felony counts in connection with using more than $1 million in public money for personal expenses. Ben Jackson, the man who pled guilty, faces up to 64.5 years in prison. Up in the Circle City, a recent report suggested a downtown Indianapolis casino could bring in hundreds of millions of dollars above any existing site. Despite this, Fort Wayne appears to be the favorite to secure a license from the state's gaming commission, as both central Indiana residents and existing nearby gaming establishments push back on the idea of an Indy casino. Staying in the capital city, the new Local Education Alliance, a state-mandated entity created to force collaboration between IPS and the city's charter schools, is considering a new A through F style rating system of their own. Heading west on I-70, the Braun administration this week approved a merger between two Vigo County medical providers, Union Hospital and Terre Haute Regional Hospital. Indiana has some of the highest hospital prices in the country, and despite assurances the state will monitor pricing, access, and quality benchmarks, this consolidation certainly will not help. Another sector of the economy where prices keep increasing exponentially is higher education, and again, the state can't keep up. This week, the State Commission for Higher Education voted to keep Frank O'Bannon Scholarship Awards flat for the 26-27 academic year. News from another state commission where 9 finalists were named for the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission openings. Governor Braun will appoint 3 of them to the board, though he faces no deadline to do so. And finally, in briefs, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, a recurring name today, was in Fort Wayne this week addressing area military contractors as part of Senator Jim Banks' Northeast Indiana Defense Summit. And D, I know we've only got you for a couple more minutes, so I wanted to see if any one of those jumped out to you this week.
Well, besides all of them, did we mention redistricting?
Unfortunately, we're gonna spend most of our Indiana segment covering the redistricting, and we're not gonna get a chance to hear from you on most of it. But you know what? Go ahead and give us your takeaways there before you got to skate.
Well, thank you. To me, it's just like I hear people, "Woe is me! What can we do? What can we do?" Well, what you can do is be a citizen, and this redistricting it was absolute proof of that. Isn't sunshine a wonderful thing, right? Democracy in action. When citizens get involved, oh my, what happens? Breakthrough in the towel. 47, so I call you know who. I don't like to even call his name out loud. It makes me ill. 47's calling him into the principal's office, the gold gilded, office. For paddling, right? And Braun, he is whining, but he's made it really clear that he has zero juice with the legislature. Absolutely none. So I think that the truth is on that is that they realize that 7-2 ain't all that bad. And if they redistricted, they would put a bunch of Democrats into their districts, and they can see what's coming down the pike. And that's next year. And that's when political science as a study tells you that the off year always goes more for, in very rare cases not, but always goes more for the opposition party. That's going to hold true next year, big time, and they know it. Let's put more Democrats in my district so that maybe I can get whipped even worse, right? I saw Senator Yoder yesterday on the League of Women Voters town hall, and she said, finally, Indiana leads in something. Right? We actually said no about something. Well, actually, Kansas was there and Utah was there, but hey, we'll take it. The whole idea was rigging. It was cheating. It was beyond the pale. It ain't over till it's over. But I think the sunshine is in all the citizens calling in, Republicans and Democrats going, no, we don't do this. That's not right. That's what made the difference, I believe.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Dee, listen, I'm going to let you go ahead and get out of here because I know you've got a place to be. But before you do, you want to say goodbye to the people? Anything you need to pitch, or do you want to have the folks visit you online somewhere?
Well, no, not really. Here in Monroe County, we get a lot done, and so you'll probably see me out and about. And I'm always willing to listen to other people's opinions because we all have them. But thank you very much for being on. I really appreciate it. I think that we need to be sure that whether we call ourselves progressives or conservatives or whatever the heck we call ourselves, that we remember that we have to stick together, and we will get out of this mess. And then we have a chance. Then we have the opportunity to make things better, or at least no worse than they were. So thank you.
All right. Dee Owens, thank you for joining us today. Always appreciate you being with us.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.
All right, that was my dear friend Dee Owens. Love to see her. Thanks to her for being with us today. So back here with Jennifer and Tabitha, let's move on and talk about a couple things I actually missed last week because there was so much news I didn't get a chance to talk about them. So first of all, um, last Thursday, Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita sued Indianapolis Public Schools, accusing the state's largest public school district of thwarting federal immigration enforcement. Now, state law blocks local government entities, including school districts, from limiting cooperation or interfering with U.S. immigrations and custom enforcement and other agencies. This lawsuit seeks an injunction preventing IPS from enforcing its policies. Now, this week, Black clergy came together to decry the suit, calling it political theater and questioning the AG's use of tax dollars. 5 IPS commissioners and several top administrators, including Superintendent Elise Johnson, also attended and joined the faith leaders in prayer. Now, listen, Jennifer, I know the state law says school districts can't thwart immigrations and custom enforcement, but I mean, like, they have an obligation to not let random masked dudes without identification come onto their campuses, don't they? Oh, you're muted.
Exactly. What would happen if somebody came in and they had ill intentions worse than dragging people out in front of their children and other people in the school? It's not a good deal either way.
Yeah, I mean, any schmuck can go into a military surplus store and buy some stuff that says, "Hey, it looks like I'm in ICE. Let me have access to your school to do God knows what." I don't see any way that they can safely and responsibly enforce this. Do you, Tabitha?
Oh man, these are children. Like, I think that is my biggest thing right there. I've already had a conversation with the ABA school that my kids attend in advance of some of these ICE raids and just said, hey, what kind of policy do you guys have for people coming to the school, removing children or whatever? I don't think this is a race thing. I think this is a parent and educator thing, because those of us that have children in schools, period, any kind of school, I think would mostly agree that it would not be good for any of the kids, any of the staff to have armed anyone inside with the educators or the children when, like, our teachers aren't armed. And there's a reason for that sort of thing. We should be protecting the education process as well.
Tabitha, what did the school say? I'm curious what they said.
They didn't really have the answer that I wanted, because my thought was, if some very aggressive people show up in fatigues, and look, I've got a lot of military people in my family, so that's where this is coming from. And I had some conversations with some people that I know, and my area, like I said, very red. There are a lot of hunters, a lot of ex-military people that have a lot of firepower, period. And even these people were like, oh no, like, this is no bueno. Like, there is no situation. There's no situation where this is going to play out well. And then, because it's unchecked, right? Like, these people don't really answer to anyone. So let's say they roll up on some school and they're just going to take all the teachers, all the kids. To where and in what capacity? And we're seeing that all over the place right now. How are people going to be able to track down their kids after the point? I mean, I just think this is just very basic stuff that we have lawmakers right now that maybe they don't have children in schools right now. Maybe their grandkids are, maybe they aren't, but they're not looking at it from that sort of connection of, oh, what would happen to my child or my grandchild or the other kids in the community? Not to mention, mental health, like Jennifer was talking about. all these kids that are traumatized for their entire lives, that no longer trust police, military, their educators, because I've seen some videos of educators letting ICE into their classroom. There has to be a line somewhere. It's like, are you part of ICE? Are you part of the military? Are you part of the police? Are you their teacher? Are you supposed to protect them?
And that's just another trauma to add on these kids. You worry about a shooter coming into the school. Now you have to worry about people in your own community, in your own government coming to school. And these can happen at any time, even if they're not there to get you, right? That's just still a very disturbing and traumatic thing.
What about your friend that's your brown friend that they take here you guys have been classmates for years, you're friendly, and all of a sudden you see these grown men or grown women, right, that aren't kids. Even for these kids that are maybe a little bit bigger, they're teenagers or what have you, they're still children. And you see these grown-ups come in and manhandle these other kids your age. Like, you see videos of it all the time online right now where these kids are just bawling. They're so traumatized already, and they're already seeing all this stuff online. To see that in person, in the flesh, like, we're just doing so many injustices right now. I don't even know how anyone that has any sort of like sane mental capacity right now can say some stupid shit like that.
Well,
and it's monstrous.
Yeah, it's monstrous.
And yeah, and Rokita is a ghoul. Like this guy, absolutely terrible. Jennifer, I was going to move on. Did you have one closing thing to say?
Well, I just think the message also that it sends to these children and their families and brown families everywhere, it sends to them that doesn't matter, you are not, you're not welcome here. And it also, in taking a group of people like that, all across the country and targeting them doesn't really help to show that the ones that are here legally, people that are born here, that they are a part of our community. And it's just another attempt to discredit people that are different than the ruling class, people, black and brown people that don't have money. It just tries to keep them down in society in the way that other people look at them.
Yeah, it absolutely terrible. And then, that's just the human element of this. But you also have the element where you're seeing the state stick its nose into individual school districts, as they always do, the continuing war on K through 12 education, and as our other story that I missed last week, are the continuing war on higher education. So a lecturer from the IU School of Social Work has been removed from teaching one of her classes called Diversity, Human Rights, and Social Justice, while the university investigates a complaint by a student against material she presented. Jessica Adams, a lecturer who joined the school last year, said a student submitted the complaint to the office of U.S. Senator Jim Banks over a graphic she used in her class. Graphic pictured there on the screen for you. Adams said Banks' office then contacted her dean. Now, the material in question was the Pyramid of White Supremacy, developed by the Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence in Boulder, Colorado. It lists forms of overt and covert white supremacy, from not challenging racist jokes at the bottom of the pyramid to lynching at the top. The phrase, "Make America Great Again," is included as covert white supremacy, and I bring this up this week because now the story has been picked up by the New York Times, so the whole country gets to see exactly what kind of fuckery we are up to in the state of Indiana here. Now listen, see, looking at the graphic there, it's like a iceberg, right? You've got the overt white supremacy above the water line there, and all the different forms of covert white supremacy below the line there. And listen, I don't know how you teach a class where I assume one of the things they're talking about is racial dog whistles. How can you teach that class without covering the fact that "Make America Great Again" is a racial dog whistle? And Tabitha, I will open that up with you.
Well, I will start by saying I drive to Indianapolis frequently, and there used to be a billboard for IU that had I believe it was an African American woman, a Caucasian man, and maybe one other. I can't remember because it's gone now. And they replaced it with just one Caucasian man. And I'm just seeing little sprinklings of all of this misogynistic sort of thing that seems like we're heading in a certain direction. I think higher education and anyone that has gone through that rung, especially the adjunct professors who make no money at all, they clearly are there because they love it and they want to educate. I had plenty of professors that had conflicting views with maybe things that I grew up with, but I was raised in a way that I was supposed to respect them because they had earned it. I think there's a conversation that could be had in people's offices that people aren't doing. And destroying higher education in general and making the populace less educated, I don't think benefits anybody at all. But I mean, why can't we just practice some critical thinking? Like, no one says that we have to agree with everybody. And then on top of all of that, I mean, the Holocaust wasn't long ago. We have a Holocaust museum in Indiana, like around Indiana State in Terre Haute, and was formed by a Holocaust survivor. I think she would vehemently disagree with students going up against their professors in that sort of way, and that lawmakers are now getting involved because, I mean, Anne Frank, most of us read that book. That was part of the Indiana curriculum. I don't know if it still is, but people have their like knickers in a twist about all these books and banning books and what, like, that's how people learn. That's how you have conversations about hard issues like race, for example. Like, what the hell are we doing, basically?
Jennifer, thoughts? I mean, academic freedom, right?
Well,
like,
so
our professors are supposed to be able to teach what they're.
Yes. Well, but they don't want them to teach. That's the whole point. But I will tell you, I was actually going to school. I was majoring in sociology, and I ended up in a class. I think it was on diversity. And I ended up changing my major to social work because of the class that I took. And I still very remember so much of the basis of what I learned in that class and how we look at people. And, you know, they're really just trying to keep people from knowing and learning the truth about things that have happened in our country, things that still very much continue to happen every single day. I don't even know why they're allowing this class. I don't know how you could teach this class if you're not talking about these things. It's like in the name. So it is important.
Well, right. Yeah. Yeah. They don't want you to be able to draw that line straight from, the founding of this country and before to what they're doing right now. I mean, boy, if you just want to look at the Epstein angle and tie that back to like a guy like Thomas Jefferson. I mean, listen, Our ruling class does not want us to see these patterns, and that is a pattern. The white supremacy is one of the patterns that recurs in this country, and they don't want us to wake up, right? To get woke, as it were. Let's talk about the big Indiana story this week. State GOP leaders led the state on a roller coaster this week, ending in a pile of smoking rubble. So the week began with the author of the state's current congressional maps, State Senator Eric Koch out of Bedford, coming out in favor of the unprecedented mid-cycle redistricting that President Trump and his allies have been pushing Hoosier Republicans to do. On Monday, Fair Maps Indiana, a deceptively named front group, announced a 6-figure ad buy targeting undeclared Senate Republicans to get them on board with the redistricting. Well, I hope they can get their money back. Actually, I don't. I hope they set it on fire. Because by the end of the week, State Senate President pro tempore Rod Bray said, "We don't have the votes. We can't get the votes. We're not doing it. We're not coming in for our special session that we announced would convene at the beginning of December." Now, Governor Mike Braun, very disappointed, says Hoosiers says Hoosier Republicans should reconsider and that they should go forward with the redistricting anyway. He's trying to lean on some folks. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. And then some breaking news after Dee hopped off the stream with me. She sent me a tweet. So Donald Trump has now weighed in. This is within the last hour, and I'm going to go ahead and see if I can't. There we go. So this is from Trump on Truth Social via Twitter. I'm reading it here, and he says, I have not read this yet, so we're gonna read it together. He says, very disappointed in Indiana State Republicans led by Rhino Senator Rod Bray and Greg Good. I'll drop that there, for not wanting to redistrict their state, allowing the United States Congress to perhaps gain 2 more Republican seats. The Democrats have done redistricting for years, Trump says, often illegally, and all other appropriate Republican states have done it. Because of these 2 politically correct type gentlemen and a few others, they could be depriving Republicans of a majority in the House. A very big deal. California is trying to pick up 5 seats, and no one is complaining about that. It's weak, quote-unquote Republicans that cause our country such problems. It's why we have crazy policies and ideas that are so bad for America. Well, he has a point there. Also, a friend of mine, Governor Mike Braun, perhaps, is not working the way he should to get the necessary votes. Considering that Mike wouldn't be governor without me, not even close, is disappointing. Any Republican that votes against this important redistricting, potentially having an impact on America itself, should be primaried. Indiana is a state with a strong, smart, and patriotic people. They want to see our country win and want to make America great again. Senators Bray, Good, and others to be released to the public later this afternoon should do their job and do it now. If not, let's get them out of office ASAP. And everybody else back as I figure out. Hey, there we are. All right. So, I guess, aside from my terrible impression today, not my best work, Jennifer, thoughts on Trump's tweet going after his boy Mike Braun?
I mean, that's not a surprise. It's just literally what he does. I mean, it's just a matter of time. And that's the problem with bending the knee and kissing the ring, is at some point, hopefully most people have a line that they have to draw, and he's going to come after you. I mean, it's going to be like that with every single Republican. My big concern now is, what is he going to hold over Indiana, right? What is he going to take from Indiana, which is going to be something from the majority of the people that in Indiana. So, whether it's withholding money that we need, if there was a tornado, or not giving enough money for SNAP, cutting budgets, Medicaid, and things like that. I mean, I do not doubt that he will retaliate, but it is good to know that we are not moving forward, at least at this point. There's one of the things that came up, obviously there's also not time, right? Because in just 6 weeks or so, finally get to go down to the state house and sign up to run. And we have to know what those districts are. I mean,
right. So. There's people running now. I was in Connorsville yesterday with Corey Amix for a reverse town hall. And he's out there, as are other candidates all across the state in these congressional districts, visiting communities, running for office, meeting potential constituents. They don't even know what maps they might be running in. He could be wasting his time. Maybe Connorsville isn't even in the district he's running in after these maps are on. And listen, that's fine for Republicans who are infinitely well resourced by their giant corporate donors, but grassroots folks out here like us don't have such luxury. Now, Tabitha, listen. I think Dee hinted at this before she had to go. Is this a case of Hoosiers, Democrats and conscientious Republicans alike reaching out to their representatives and pressuring them, and they saw the light, or Did they realize they would be shooting themselves in the foot if they did this? If you look at the elections a couple weeks ago, a place like Virginia, for example, every House district in the state there, at a state delegate level, swung toward Democrats by a lot. They've got themselves maybe safe 30-point districts in 7 seats now. Well, if they borrow too many of their voters from this district and put them in that district, you put more Democratic voters from Indianapolis, from Lake County in these once Republican districts, and now you have 9, maybe theoretically 15 to 18-point Republican districts. Well, in a wave election, maybe they go from having a 7-2 advantage to things being more like 5-4, which is frankly probably where they should be. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I'd say I think Hoosiers tend to be very fair-minded people, and generally, you're supposed to fight one-on-one. One person going up a group generally is seen as like dirty pool, and 7 out of 9 isn't enough. First off, I mean, you're already kind of leading that way. I think most Hoosiers would see that as like, you already have 7 out of 9. Why do you have to have 9 out of 9? That seems like an unfair fight. And then I would bring up certain issues that are coming up that are not going away that I think people, this is why you're seeing a swing. I would say by and large, Hoosiers in general are like, well, we don't rape kids here. That's something we don't like. That's kind of a big one. Like we take care of our elderly, our disabled. And there are a lot of people right now that are in office in Indiana that know that it's unpopular that they've been quiet. And I think Hoosiers and people from the Midwest in general, like we are a little bit more warrior type, roughneck farming union people that, even in my area, it might be, heavily red now, but, it wasn't too many years ago where it was pretty democratic. And I think those principles still stand. And I think those politicians right now know it. And the ones that are really in tune that say are from Indiana, not the transplants from Michigan that are, going a little crazy with their nonsense. And, we know who those type of people are, but the real Hoosiers, like my family, for example, you know, I had people in my family fight in the American Revolutionary War. There are a lot of families like that still in Indiana that hold those ideals. And I think a lot of those people right now are watching very closely what's happening in this state. And the politicians that know those things, they know it. And they know that those people are going to come after them for the type of things that they're doing.
Jennifer, this I think ties back into what we were talking about at the end of our our national stories there. This is the kind of falling apart of MAGA. Like I think maybe they've hit their high water mark. Trump doesn't seem to have the juice anymore. He can't just say do it to Mike Braun and Indiana Republicans and have them do his bidding. I mean, obviously, we see with his tweet today that he still thinks he has the juice, but is this a sign that maybe things are receding there? Oh, you're muted again.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think not all these Republicans signed on for this, right? It doesn't matter what party you are, we all saw things falling apart in this country. We saw, mass amount of people not having enough food. We saw even more people, though, moving to help those people and speaking out a lot more. I know for myself in social media, I started posting a lot more things and had a lot more people that were obviously not Democrats having conversations with me. And they were really asking real questions. Like I posted a lot recently about being on Medicaid, using WIC, having my children in Head Start and some of those things. And what sometimes started as conversations that were somewhat rude, I was able to kind of ask questions. And people were telling me like that they themselves were not trying to be rude. They had legitimate questions about what is going on. And things that they have been told, almost their whole lives. And so, I think that more people in the community, regardless of what party they are putting pressure on the people in office. We know that in Indiana, some of these, and the shape of Indiana is changing too. It is changing down here in Southern Indiana. We are getting a lot more folks from Louisville and the communities. So, we'll see. I just keep holding out that people are going to do the right thing, right? I'm holding out that Braun is going to love Indiana more than he loves himself and Trump.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that just hopes in the end that people are going to do the right thing, even though unfortunately I am continually proven wrong. But hopefully
as that coalition falls apart, I think there's going to be opportunities. A lot of folks got involved in MAGA or were seduced by it for various reasons, and not necessarily always the worst reasons. I mean, I know what we focused on those, but there's a lot of good people who voted that way for whatever reason. Bad information, incomplete information, whatever. There are going to be opportunities, I think, going forward. Now, let's move to our last thing this week. And I wanted to make sure we get a chance to cover this a little bit because I've got you both here, and you both do fantastic advocacy work with the autism community, with the disability community. And there were a couple stories this week that, touch on that. So first of all, we saw, and Tabitha mentioned this earlier, that MedWise is being kicked off as a state Medicaid provider, leaving us with only a few. Also, the big story, I think, in this lane this week is that a governor's group recommended a usage cap for applied behavioral therapy. And Jennifer, I'm going to let you kind of cook on this one, if you will, because that is your lane specifically. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about, if we get a chance, was in the government shutdown, another little piece of language that got slipped into the agreement to open things back up was a ban on Delta-8 THC and other hemp-derived THC products. I know the Kentucky Senator Rand Paul made a big stink about this one. The Kentucky guys are, man, him and Massey, the Kentucky libertarian types, are a confusing bunch. Half the time they're really good, and half the time you just want to run your head into a wall with these guys.
I know.
But this is a big industry in Kentucky, and there's folks in Indiana doing this as well. But I know that there have been studies that shown that CBD, especially, and maybe some like low dose THC, are very helpful for folks with certain spectrum disorders. And you can correct me on that if I'm wrong.
No, that's true. Sorry.
What I was going to say,
you're going to lead on the marijuana.
If we may, no, I'm going to let you talk about this ABA usage cap for a little bit. And actually, if the two of you want to go for a couple minutes, I'm going to take myself off the screen and step away for a moment. If you would if you would kindly carry this thing for me for a moment.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, so I am a board certified behavior analyst. So I was excited to come on and talk about ABA. I actually am one of the people that had written a lengthy letter to the work group with some of my suggestions. There are some of them in here, not that they necessarily came from me, but I think the first thing I just really want to point out about applied behavior analysis is that it is individualized to the person receiving the services. It is not like, oh, you get these vaccines or you do this thing. It is very much individualized for each person. And when they have plans and they are looking for change and growth, that is compared against themselves, not other people. So to come and say, that this group of people may only need this many hours is just shows how much they don't understand about applied behavior analysis, which doesn't surprise me because when I first looked at the people that were serving in this work group, there's only one person that is a BCBA, I believe, and that person is actually, I think, also a psychologist. So they're not even, I don't think, practicing ABA. I don't even think that there were people that, and I could be wrong, but that owned or managed applied behavior analysis, ABA schools. So this to me is very much about money, which we already, knew that. But, this is a 21 member work group, and it definitely was not representative of the people that work in the field, the people that do the job, the people that oversee them, the parents. I don't, there may have been one or two parents on here, but I have worked with disabilities services in the state of Indiana for 25 years. Never do they really include the people that do the work. So those are just a couple of starting things. I have a lot more to say about that, but I want Tabitha to jump in here and kind of talk about, you have 3 children. So I'm wondering, sorry, there's a bug.
I understand. Yeah, so I have 3 little kids. My oldest is going to be 6 soon, and the twins just turned 4. But I've just seen exponential progress in my children.
Good.
And, my older one, he was initially diagnosed with a speech delay, then global developmental delay, which then a little bit later on led to autism spectrum disorder. And then recently, he just got diagnosed with ADHD. And so, people in the community know that there are also a lot of comorbidities that come along with autism. And, the only people that really know and understand what is going on with autism or anything that touches neurodiversity should have been on that panel. And I think that's a big problem that we have in this state and in this country as well. You have a lot of people that sit on these boards or are part of these committees that aren't actually living that life. And whether it is a parent or a BCBA or an RBT, an adult that has autism spectrum disorder, I think that was a mistake. That's about the nicest way I can put that, because how can you speak on something that you're not living or you're not experiencing and then dictate to a group of people what they should be experiencing? Now, like you said, Jennifer, we know this is all about money. There are a lot of different ways that they could go after these companies that took some of this money and maybe didn't allocate it appropriately. And I know they have put, a little bit of a guardrail on that now, but maybe find some ways that you can go back and find some of these organizations that were taking extra money that they shouldn't have, that are now limiting access to these services for these children that need it now.
Well, this is classic for Indiana. They start a new program and they don't know what, they don't have a handle on it in the first place. And so, they're trying to add more layers now. They're going to make things worse. So now they want a whole nother department at FSSA about to oversee the behavior services. But one thing we haven't really talked about is that to become a board certified behavior analyst, it is very stringent. It is, you have to have a master's degree, and then you have to take a test, which most people fail the first time. I failed the first time. It's very common for multiple test takers. There's also 2,000 hours worth of supervised practice that you have to have. And it's overseen also by a board that's in Colorado. And so they have a very high ethics code. I feel like, as somebody who's worked in the field, there is really a lot built in there. But there's also, what has happened is there's just so many companies that have come from out of state that have just flooded. Now, I had decided that my company, I own a Medicaid waiver company. We primarily just work with the Medicaid waivers, but we have the need for ABA in my community. So earlier this year, I announced that we were going to start that process. And then, all of these things happened. So I've kind of been waiting to see how this is going to fall out before I decide to add that service. And now they're talking about having a moratorium. So that means for a certain period of time, they're not going to allow any new companies. They're talking about specific areas right now. I'm assuming they might be talking about the Indianapolis area. I've also heard like Fort Wayne, because we need providers really actually all over the state. I think there's only about 300 providers, which sounds like a lot, but it's not, because we have such a huge need for this service.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the article right now because we've got 8,000 Hoosier kids relying on ABA therapy.
And
Apparently,
most of them are
between
not
ages.
getting it.
Yeah.
There's like a huge wait list
Mhm.
for this. And then there's also the problem, which is something they're trying to address in this, is that when you have multiple insurance companies covering people and they're paying different rates, then a lot of times, you know, a provider, if you got a wait list, even though they say they're not doing this, you know, you're going to take the company that's paying $25 more an hour than the company that's not. So they are trying to, one of the proposed things in here is that they're will put pressure on other insurance companies to have similar rates as Medicaid does. And then on top of that, one thing I discovered as I was kind of starting the process to become a provider is that there are a lot of companies, like I said, there's a lot that have flooded in here, but there's a lot that aren't even here. They're not here.
Yeah.
Nobody is here. They're in California somewhere.
Mhm.
And I had started a process with a company called Tilly that I could be a contractor and then have contractors underneath me. And I did my research on that company, but then as I started to do the training, the videos were like, oh, these are really shitty videos for a BCP, for an ABA company. And it was like in British. So then I started doing more digging. This company was actually a different company before that. So I used that name. I did research on it, found what a shitty company they were. And they have now changed their name again. So there is a lot of stuff going on. So, you know, we do need some monitoring in the state. I don't think that we need a whole nother department because they're just going to do more of what they're doing now, which is making decisions about services that they don't have real experience, lived experience in. And that's what Tabitha brought up. And this is a thing that I think that we're going to hear more and more about, not just related to services for people, but in politics. You know, myself, I am a late diagnosed autistic person. I learned that running for state representative a year ago. And a lot of stuff with ABA really clicked to me even more. You know, I practice it, but to really understand it in your head, learning that I was autistic just made such a big change. But the thing that I also want to bring up here is lived experience is really big, but I see much a rise of that alongside progressive Democrats, right? Because a lot of us are really standing up and telling our stories about the lives that we've lived or our family members that we've lived. And this is just another stage and another group of people that I think is going to continue to be a lot stronger. So I'm sorry, I got off track. I always do.
Well, I was just also going to mention that I did not like when Governor Braun brought RFK here and all the wave of sort of the anti-autism stuff that started to happen. And so then I kicked into kind of hyperdrive with, I always say I graduated from advocacy to activism. And I think most people do at some point. I also am a late diagnosed, high masking autistic female. Right. So I've spent the majority of my life navigating people and it's exhausting. And then to watch my children through this whole process, you know, my kids weren't speaking. And these RBTs and BCBAs that work with them, they really care and they've become their family and their friends. And, you know, just there's so much negative talk out there right now about autism. I think it's because we're the canaries in the coal mine.
Oh, hell yeah. They don't want us to know our power at all. Yeah.
And so that works to their disadvantage, right? Because if you have a bunch of adults starting to step forward, even if they are late diagnosed, even if they don't know a lot of other adults with autism, like the need to find like-minded individuals and all the spidey senses that are going off in people like that right now that are connecting and saying, listen, like this is like a war on autism. And we can't just do this for ourselves. Like we have to do this for future generations. And I'm often thinking to myself, what kind of life are my children going to have when I'm gone? And so for me right now, I feel like I don't have a choice but to be an advocate and an activist. And I don't care if I'm going up against Braun or, you know, JD Vance or Trump or any of the rest of them. Like if they're going to come after my family's services, other kids like them that need these services, like it's a no-brainer for me.
And it's also one of the strengths of being autistic, right? Is having no problem not seeing that those systems, like being able to just go and speak your truth. Some of us could do that kind of well before we unmask, but like unmasking just takes a lot, off of that. So autism is a big thing in this state. I have spoken to many legislators about it. I spoke with Rod and Gray over the summer out in Mooresville about my theory about Morgan County, Scott County, the very high recovery there in those communities. I think a lot of it is tied to undiagnosed autism, and it's generational. It's also genetic, which is it's in your DNA. That's the one thing people don't seem to get a lot of. Like, if there's one person in your family on the spectrum, there's a lot more. So, I do think that there are a lot of people, regardless of what party they are, that are becoming more and more aware of autism and how it affects our community and how it may affect even their families. Because I have a lot of conversations with people all over the place, as I'm sure that you do too, Tabitha.
Yeah. Well, this is a cross-party issue. This is an American issue. This is a global issue. This isn't something that's going away. And so, not to mention that this is like a war on accessibility, disability, autism, whatever. Like, we're all in the same camp at this point. It doesn't really matter if you're in a wheelchair, if you have a prosthetic leg, if you have autism. Like, they're going to come for everybody at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And just, just have it. Listening to you both right now kind of reminds me. You drew a line, and I'm going to compare this to what we talked about with that pyramid just a little bit ago. So I think of Greta Thunberg and how she talks about her autism as a kind of superpower, right? Mm-hmm. And the way you both talk about discovering late in life, the way that diagnosis kind of shifted your thinking, and it's like, oh man, I was dealing with this the whole time, and you realize that if you had the tools the whole time, what your power could be, and these folks in charge who don't want a whole army of Gretas to understand their power.
I think there's quite a few women out there. We were talking earlier about some of these Republicans that have flipped. My experience, just like you're talking about, as an autistic person, and realizing that, and then realizing, shit, what have I been doing? Like, I have been fooled by these people. That is something that happens with a lot of autistic people. I fired 2 people in my company because I knew the whole time things that were going on, but I just couldn't, figure it out. Once I learned I was autistic, I did. A lot of people make major changes in their life, whether it's with a partner, a best friend, or a political party. It is that very much a thing, that when you realize. And
speaking of political party, I think it's important to toss this out there right now. There are politicians in Indiana that currently hold office that have children on the spectrum. And I am fascinated and disgusted by the fact that they have not stepped forward in any significant way and said, listen, you know what? I may be a Republican, but this is my kid. This is my family. Like, this is the future of my child. The fact that some of these people haven't broken party for the sake of their own children at this point should make people wonder about their competency moving forward.
Absolutely. 100%. It's that old us and them thing, right? Oh, well, it's okay. We're the deserving ones, that those other people don't deserve these.
Or they just think that they can pay for services, so they shouldn't be worried about those brown kids over there that aren't going to get services.
Exactly. It's disappointing. Listen, we've run long, and I appreciate both of you sticking around, and that we had a chance to have this conversation, and I look forward to hearing more from both of you about this, because neurodiversity touches kind of all aspects of our society, and in ways that we're really just beginning to discover, I think, over the last several years. And I can't wait to have more conversations like this with the both of you. Before we get going, I do want to give each of you a chance to pitch what you got to pitch, or tell folks where they can find you online. Jennifer.
Well, my name is Jennifer David. I'm running for state representative for District 66, and you can find me most of the time on Facebook. I also just Jen David for Hoosiers, or Jennifer David for Hoosiers, and then my website is Jen David for Hoosiers, JENNDAVID, number 4, Hoosiers.com.
Very good. And Tabitha, where can the good folks find you?
Well, I'm currently working on the website, but it is staringdownthestorm.com, and you can basically find me anywhere, Tabitha Ziegler or Staring Down the Storm Autism Advocacy in America. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
Fantastic. And me, I am at HoosLeft on all of the social medias, on Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram. It's at whosleft.us. That is the website to subscribe over there, and really appreciate a paid subscription if you can. So on behalf of my guests today, Jennifer David, Tabitha Ziegler, and Dee Owens, who is since departed onto her meeting this afternoon, I will bid you all adieu, and we will see you next week. But until that time, love each other, Indiana.